Have you ever tried sitting close to roaring beasts, flying weapons, and live executions just to prove your status and worth? In ancient Rome's Colosseum, power wasn't shown by wealth alone. It was measured in inches from danger. The front row, known as the podium, was where emperors and senators displayed their prestige, seated right at the edge of the blood-soaked sand. But that prized position came at a cost. One wrong move, a misfired spear, or a panicked animal could turn honor into horror. There were no barriers strong enough, no distance safe enough to guarantee survival in the empire's deadliest theater. So today, let's take our place in the front row seats of Colosseum and uncover why those seats meant status and sudden death. The Colosseum's social ladder. When Vespasian opened the Flavian amphitheater in AD 80, Rome's leaders carefully planned every seat to reflect their strict social order. The massive arena could hold some 50,000 to 80,000 spectators, each placed in a section that matched their rank. Along the lowest tier, known as the podium or front row, sat the emperor himself, the Vestal Virgins, and Rome's senators. Directly above them, the equites. Roman knights and other prominent nobles took their places. Wealthier citizens then filled the middle levels, while the upper tiers gave plebeians, artisans, and children a more distant view. And at the very top, women and slaves crowded onto simple wooden benches. Every guest showed a pottery ticket or tessera carved with their entrance gate and exact row and seat numbers. These guaranteed that no one sat above or below their proper rank. The senators' front row slabs were inscribed with names, transforming them into personal thrones. Being seen there signaled that the emperor recognized one's status. But those prized seats came at a price. Sitting inches from gladiator battles, wild animal hunts, and public executions meant danger could erupt without warning, turning privilege into peril. Romans prized such seating for honor and the thrill it brought each show. Owning the front row, for a Roman noble, attending games in the Colosseum was a civic duty and a political statement. The emperor's invitation to the podium announced favor and influence. So senators reclined on cushioned benches under cloth canopies, sipping wine and weaving laurel garlands. They watched and mocked battles, gladiator duels, animal hunts, and public executions. Each event played out on the sand just feet below them. Yet the ironies ran deep. By placing Rome's rulers closest to the arena's violence, the Flavian designers celebrated both imperial might and the ever-present threat of disorder. The first row created a living stage where privilege met peril. Senators used the exposure to display courage. Rumors circulated of glittering gold rings, knocked from fingers and smashed under charging beasts. To withdraw from one's seat marked weakness. So front row spectators often swallowed fear, choosing to stay put and risk injury, or worse, rather than dishonor. Proximity to danger. Moreover, today's stadiums protect front row fans with helmets and high railings. But ancient Romans had no such safety. Instead, they had a wooden fence, sometimes topped with ivory balls, that spun if animals tried to climb over. Behind this barrier, nets of rope or wire hung loosely, aiming to catch debris. But these defenses did more to keep fighters and animals inside than to shield the audience. Eventually, over time, posts weakened and nets frayed under constant attack. A single glancing blow from a charging boar could snap a beam, and a lion's pounce could tear down the net completely. Danger never announced itself. Spears and arrows came flying in an instant. In the Venation's hunts, wild beasts battled hunters and each other, while missed javelins tumbled into the crowd. Gladiators cast curved darts, whose metal points sometimes spun over the fence and into the seats. When those weapons slammed against marble steps, shards shot out like deadly shrapnel, and there was no glass or cushions to soften the blow. In such situations, senators sat clutching ivory-handled fans and chairs, their hearts racing every time they heard a clang or a roar, knowing that at any moment a shard of steel could carve into the lap. Flying weapons one, constant threat for those on the Iamacavia was the rain of weapons and debris. Gladiators fought with spears, tridents, and heavy darts, each wielded to test their skill and reach. When one miscalculated a throw, weapon tips bounced off shields and skidded toward the barrier. Archaeologists have uncovered arrowheads stuck in the stone blocks of the first row, silent evidence of narrow escapes. In staged hunts, slingers hurled stones and javelin wielders targeted fleeing animals or human participants. A slightly off-angle throw meant iron-tipped weapons skimmed over the low wooden fence. During mock naval battles known as naumachii, actors aboard wagons threw painted rocks that shattered on impact. The splintered wood flew into the air like jagged glass, threatening those seated just feet away. Now spectators in the first row had little protection beyond their togas, or toga praetextae, the official robes of their rank. This means that a glancing blow from a spear tip could easily pierce soft fabric and skin. And when metal points struck the marble steps, they produced lethal fragments that scattered unpredictably toward unprepared viewers. The gallery often echoed with cries of "Look out!" whenever a bowstring twanged or a hand thrust a spear forward. But such warnings came at the last possible moment, offering front-row Romans only a split second to duck or twist away. However, despite knowing the risks, many chose to remain on the edge of violence, drawn by the thrill of the games and the call of prestige. Senators sometimes sat on padded cushions, hoping to lessen the sting of splintered wood or arrow fragments. But even extra padding could not stop a steel point. Time and again, the first row proved as dangerous as the arena itself, showing that the highest honor came with the greatest risk. No barrier truly guaranteed safety. Wild hunts. Moreover, nothing stirred a Roman crowd's passion like the roar of wild beasts in the Colosseum. From Africa and Asia came lions, tigers, bears, leopards, and elephants prowling the arena. The Venationes began when massive gates clanged open, freeing caged animals into the ring. Romans craned their necks at each roar and clash. Spectators leaned forward, eager for the collision of nature's raw power and spectacle. Skilled hunters, costumed as heroes, entered the ring to face these creatures. Armed with spears and nets, they tested their reflexes against fighters far stronger and faster. When a bear or lion attacked, its heavy body struck wooden posts, shaking the low fence. A single jump carried those animals directly into front-row space, surprising nobles and letting nets frayed, and guards scrambled to push the beast back. Each collision reminded Row 1 viewers how close they sat to danger. One moment, a senator might relax. The next, he felt furry hide brush his arm, gasping as the creature landed feet away, proving no barrier stood between him and the wild beast. Similarly, elephants, brought in by sponsors, drew gasps across the stands. Used in grand displays, these massive creatures often panicked at the roar of 50,000 voices. Eventually, their bodies smashed fence posts and scattered ivory balls meant to block climbing. Splinters rained into laps like rain. Once, a frightened bull, suddenly released, charged the wooden palisade, its horns gouging panels and forcing first-row women and children to scramble back in terror. Wolves joined the danger as well. These animals prowled the fence base, using claws to loosen stones and chew ropes. A single creature could find a gap in inscribed marble, and when one lion burst onto the polished slabs, guards raised small round shields to ward it off, but none held long against its claws and pounding shoulders. Shields offered little help. The beast pawed and tore until a guard's shield broke away. A roar sent senators into panic. They scrambled back to seats, slipping on dust. In seconds, honor turned to terror. Public executions next. Executions in the Colosseum went well beyond mere spectacle. Prisoners condemned to damnatio ad bestias, death by beasts, entered the arena naked, bound, and facing hungry predators. They stood in silence as heavy gates slid open, releasing the animals trained for violence. These public deaths served as dire warnings to all who watched, showing what happened to criminals or enemies of the state. However, the drama often spilled dangerously close to the crowd. When a condemned man fumbled his shield or lost his footing, it could fly into the wooden fence that separated the sand from the marble seats. If he stumbled, his body might strike a post or tangle in its ropes. On some days, organizers set free multiple beasts at once. They chased each other or tore at their prey scraps near the edge of the arena, licking blood from the sand. During that time, front row people sitting just behind the fence sometimes felt the breath of a lion or the hot muscle of a bear brushing against their robes. One such moment left a high-ranking man nursing a deep gash after a bear lunged at fresh blood in the sand and diverted towards him. Guards rushed in, the clatter of their spears echoing off stone walls, but not before the wound was dealt. Additionally, a single forced leap could send a terrified slave or persecuted individual hurtling over the low barrier in desperate flight. When that happened, the runner often slid down the marble steps into the laps of the emperors below. Also, at times, the crowd found itself tangled in the same chaos meant for condemned souls. Front row individuals leaning forward in excitement risked snagging a prisoner's noose or a beast's flank as it moved too close. In those brief seconds, they did not only put themselves at risk, but also everyone around them. So public executions at Colosseum turned that prized first row into a danger zone where a spectator could become an unexpected victim at any moment. From shields and trenches to rushing beasts and frantic flight, the first row blurred the line between honor and harm repeatedly. Structural hazards. The Colosseum stood on a solid base of concrete and travertine, but after centuries of use and the wrath of nature, its strength began to crack. Two big earthquakes, one in AD 443 and another in AD 508, shook the entire structure. The shaking loosened the marble slabs that made up the podium, the front row of seats. And long before those quakes, in AD 217, a lightning strike set fire to the wooden supports under the giant awnings. Burning beams crashed down, and people sitting below had to dodge heavy pieces of charred wood and splintered supports. By the time the crowds gathered again, some marble steps no longer fit together. Emperors perched on those wide steps sometimes felt a block shift under them as they cheered their favorite gladiators. A loud roar, whether from a crowd of 50,000 or another tremor, could make slabs slide, and one small misstep on a broken edge might twist an ankle or send a man tumbling into the arena sand. Even top officials found themselves sitting on patches where carpenters had hurriedly nailed wood into gaps. To keep the games going, ancient engineers later tried to strengthen the podium. They drove iron clamps into cracks and hammered lead dowels to hold slabs in place. But many of those early fixes lay hidden under layers of plaster. So when a senator on the front seat leaned forward or shifted weight, a stone could loosen with a sudden clink. A falling fragment might bruise a foot or smash fingers as people gripped stone railings. So, for all its glory, the front row seats in the Colosseum were also the most dangerous. Prestige and peril sat side by side, and no promise of protection could keep those honored guests completely and truly safe forever. Crowd dynamics. Moreover, Romans loved spectacle, and the roar of 50,000 to 80,000 voices raised the roof of stone and concrete. Front row members felt the ground tremble with collective excitement. When a gladiator fell, the crowd gasped and sometimes surged forward. No rope barriers kept the human tide in check. A sudden movement towards the fence could send the boldest spectators pushing and hurting each other. During major games, attendees packed the first row shoulder to shoulder. Drinking wine from silver cups, they sometimes spilled liquid on the marble, creating slippery spots. Additionally, a startled animal lunging at a gladiator might prompt a wave of alarm, with people leaping out of their seats in unison. Those behind pressed forward, shoving the front row into the fence or over an unguarded gap known as a vomitorium, exit corridor. Senators and emperors carried ceremonial cloaks and parasols, ill-suited for gripping. A forwarded clutch on a bench rail broke their grip, while a single stumble near a narrow stair plunged some into the sand or into the vomitorium's dark corridors. So even guards stationed behind could not quell a human surge once it began. In the chaos, people fell, chests cracked, and some suffocated under the mass of bodies. Makeshift defenses. Now, of course, Romans understood the need for protection, even if crude by modern standards. They strung ivory balls, free-spinning spheres, along the top rail to fray animal paws and claws. Wire nets hung behind wooden posts to catch small weapons and splinters. Armed guards patrolled the immercavia, spears ready to prod any animal or gladiator that breached the barrier. Also, sharpshooters with bows perched in hidden galleries, ready to kill man or beast that threatened the crowd. Yet arrows flew over their heads as often as toward the ring. Nets grew brittle in humidity, ivory balls loosened with rusting pins, and guards could not cover every foot of fence. When 3 or 4 dangers attacked at once, spears, animals, crowd surges, makeshift measures proved scant defense. Front-row viewers sometimes brought personal leather cushions or small wooden shields to sit on and to protect themselves. But even a leather pad or wooden shield could not absorb the force of a charging rhino's impact. Personal gear weighed heavy in their laps as they risked injuries from above, behind, and below. Recorded close calls and legends. No official records now consist record of deaths among those in the podium seats, but over 1,000 people died at the Colosseum alone each year due to the violence. Also, historians and archaeologists have pieced together glimpses of disasters that show how deadly a privilege could be. Cassius Dio recounts an emperor leaping to rescue a senator when a bull thundered against the barrier, nearly sending him over the edge. Medieval chroniclers describe senators scrambling to safety as a lightning-struck beam from the awning crashed down, smashing benches beneath them. Over the centuries, these high-status spots transformed from symbols of imperial favor into silent memorials for unexpected victims. In AD 523, a historian wrote about an earthquake that shattered front-row stones, burying several patricians under heavy marble until loyal slaves dug them free with wooden poles. Modern excavations beneath collapsed seating reveal human bones crushed by fallen slabs and shattered ribs. These scattered accounts confirm what Romans whispered in the stands. The prime seat came with prime risk. They remind us that no marble bench, no matter how much grand, could shield the powerful from nature's fury or Venation's chaos. These fragments warn that honor and peril sat side by side at the podium's edge. These vivid glimpses keep alive the perilous allure of Rome's grandest arena. Psychology of privilege and peril. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone choose such a dangerous seat? Well, in Rome, virtue or virtues meant courage, and those in the front row displayed their bravery for all to see. To step back would bring public shame. Senators and other front-row individuals talked proudly at dinner parties about narrowly avoiding a lion's claw or dodging a thrown dagger. These stories boosted their standing and signaled they enjoyed the emperor's trust, since only he could grant them that dangerous privilege. Additionally, facing the thrill of danger mixed fear with victory. Romans said surviving a close call in the arena was on par with a soldier's deeds in battle. Friends in the audience pushed one another to stay put. If one man remained calm while others panicked, he was celebrated for his discipline. His story traveled through the forum, spreading honor among peers. Even today, fans pay high prices for front-row seats to feel excitement. But while modern audiences risk bruises from foul balls or spilled drinks, Roman nobles faced something far sharper, like metal blades and saber-toothed beasts, making their courage far more literal and the rewards far more genuine. Thus, choosing that seat in Colosseum showed how deeply status, danger, and spectacle were linked in Roman life. Few would dare such risky honor today. So, the Colosseum's front row balanced glory and sudden death on a knife's edge. Reserved for Rome's elite, the podium offered unmatched proximity to gladiator duels, venations, and executions. But that closeness meant exposure to stray weapons, furious beasts, collapsing stone, and surging crowds. Makeshift barriers like nets, ivory balls, and guards proved fragile against nature and human folly. Senators who flaunted their seats risked gashes, fractures, or loss of life for public honor. When we stand before the Colosseum today, we see its grandeur, but we must also remember the peril that lay at its heart. Those lowest front row benches brought Romans face to face with violence, reminding them that privilege can carry the gravest price. Now, if we ask you, what are your thoughts about these Colosseum seats, which meant status and sudden death? Share with us in the comments section below. Also, if you liked this video, share it with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more interesting content.